Okay, thanks. Hey, everyone. Welcome to ACDC. This is number 163. It is issue 1673 in the PM repo. There's a link to the agenda here. And yeah, the agenda is a bit lighter today, mainly just as we're all working on Fusaka. And then there's a few announcements for Glamsterdam, but I don't think we'll get too much into that today. So let's go ahead and get started. So first up with Fusaka, we have the devnets. So we have devnet 3 that's been going. I believe there was just a non-finality test over the last day there, and we could reflect on devnet 4 and see if there's anything to touch on there. So let's see, Perry or Barnabas, would one of you like to touch on either of those topics?
Yeah, I can. So devnet 3 has regained finality in the past couple of hours, and we have turned on all the validators. The EL had some bug that we pushed out and should be merged very soon. And some clients like Lighthouse and Gas is still having issues syncing up to head. The syncing bug is supposed to be fixed quite soon in the trunk branch, and that is what we are using now in devnet 3. So for now, I will just have to roll out a custom branch that the Lighthouse team has been working on. There has been a memory leak that I've detected in REST. I have reported it to them, and there's a few more nodes that are still haven't been able to catch up to the head, and we'll be looking into those. And ideally, you can also take a look and see which nodes are offline, and if it's one of your node, then please take a look and see if you can debug it. We have about 80% participation now.
Okay, thanks for the update. Yeah, anything on devnet 4? So just as a refresher, we launched devnet 4 and yeah, I ran into some bugs. There was an ambiguity in the PPO spec, which led to some confusion. And then yeah, I kicked off some of these other issues with the syncing things that Barnabas mentioned. So yeah, we've taken the devnet down. The plan is to launch devnet 5, which we'll get into next. I don't know if there's anything else to touch on devnet 4 at the moment.
Yeah, so the scope for devnet 5 should be pretty much exactly the same as devnet 4, and the spec did not change from devnet 3. So the only difference is that we really would like to get every client to have their trunk branches ready. So hopefully sometime next week, everyone will have all their PRS changes merged into their trunk branches, and then we can launch this devnet 5.
And devnet 5 is also a large devnet like devnet 4, right?
Yes, exactly. That is the plan.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear from CL teams here, and honestly, even EL teams if you're present, about yeah the timing there. So ideally, yeah, we can get everything into the default trunk end of next week. Sooner the better, because then that sets us up to have a devnet 5 that should look, pretty close to what we'd want for mainnet. So anyone have any issues with that or any complications we should discuss? Dreamer.
Yeah, just a comment, like some of the chaos on DevNet 5 had revealed to us that the changes to our sync algorithm needed to be a little bit more extensive than we had originally thought, than just compared to finding bugs. We had to do a bit of a redesign. The code for that, my understanding, is written. We're just trying to test it, but we're fine with like launching DevNet 5 before that's necessarily fully tested. We would want that to block the launch of DevNet 5, is what we're trying to say. But yeah, we're just in the testing stage for those changes.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I think just to kind of pipeline things towards mainnet, it'd be nice to have that and say like the unstable branch for Lighthouse. You feel like that's reasonable to have something together next week?
Yeah, I've been working on the.
The main reason we would want all of this in trunk branches because this is a very, very expensive devnet. And if you're gonna need to have another one down the line later on anyway, then like if it's just gonna break, then there's no point of running the devnet. So we ideally want to have it nicely tested in devnet 3, do unfinality test and test if everything is working with the trunk branches before we launch the expensive devnet 5.
Yeah, so I have a branch that is working now and was syncing on DevNet 3 with the non-finality and stuff. So I think it is working. I just need to iron out a few more corner cases. So I think I should be able to get a PR up against unstable pretty soon now. So yeah, I think we should be ready for DevNet 5 as well.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah, we're also merged to trunk branch. We're doing a refactor and trying to get that unit tested, but by end of next week, hopefully that'll be real close.
Cool. Anyone feel like that timeline doesn't make sense? Okay, I'll assume everyone agrees then. And yeah, I'm not sure how things look on the EL side. But yeah, if you're listening, keep this in mind. It'd be nice to have DevNet 5 up as soon as we can. And yeah, I guess if anything, we can touch on the next ACDE for that. So, okay. And I think from there, we see how DevNet 5 goes. And at that point, assuming it goes well, I think we can, start to seriously think about testnet timelines, which then would give us a mainnet date. So I know we've talked quite a bit about timelines in the past. Yeah, I think we're more or less on track to keep things moving. So I think for now, we'll just focus on getting everything into trunk and yeah, look for the launch of DevNet 5. Anything else on DevNets? Otherwise, there are a few other items for Fusaka to touch on. Okay, Prysm says here in the chat, we'll need about a week to get things ready. Yeah. Yeah, James, do you know if that's like a week from today or?
Optimistically, I think a week from today.
Okay.
But more likely maybe by the following Monday or so, hopefully.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah. Good to know. And otherwise, then we will see how things progress. Okay. There was a quick FYI here. We covered this on the last call, but essentially, it was just adjusting this parameter for minimal. This will help with testing because then we can run larger ball counts in the minimal preset, which is just a lighter sort of way to run devnets and things. That's been merged. And as far as I know, Justin Travaglio was planning to release an Alpha 5 version of the specs today. So it will include that change and yeah, maybe a few other things, but something to get on your radar. And yeah, hopefully this change to the ball parameter here that I linked isn't too invasive. Of course, I think the focus should be getting towards mainnet. That being said, this will help with testing. So yeah, just try to find the right balance between getting this done and everything else. Okay. Justin, anything else on the spec release?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, cool. Then, okay, the last Fusaka item here. This came up in a few different forums this week with some different async conversations. I figured we'd touch on it. It sounds like I think we resolved it again in the different places this has been discussed. But Eton raised a question about sort of how BPOs work. We partitioned them with fork digest. We decided many calls ago to not include the fork version, and there's been some active discussion around how this kind of works. And if there was a potential, DOS vector here, some security concern. I think after analysis done this week by many of you, we've kind of agreed that this is okay, but I did want to open the floor to have this conversation in case there was something to discuss. Yeah, anyone have anything to say here? I mean, I guess what one TLDR is just that it sounds like this is more of a theoretical attack vector. It would require quite a bit of the network to not upgrade and be a pretty, pretty involved attack. So it seems like most of us think that it's not realistic. So we can kind of move ahead as planned.
Yeah, just to maybe kind of like add a little bit more detail. So it's the 3 areas of impact that we analyzed were: first, can we make nodes engage in can an attacker make nodes in the majority partition, engage in wasteful work by fetching blocks that were produced in the minority fork, and their parents and so on, because they don't know the parents. Will they go on a chase, on a hunt, trying to look for the parents, and this would lead to wasteful work? That was concern 1. The other concern was, can this then in turn, because the potential attacker, theoretical attacker here, would be the only party that's able to actually serve the data for those blocks, would they be able to get an advantageous position in the mesh by boosting their peer scores, given that they're the only ones that are able to satisfy the data availability of that block? And that is very implementation dependent. And yeah, we determined that it really wasn't a concern here. And then at last, the third point is, is it possible to cross feed the attestations from the majority chain into the minority fork to boost the weight of that chain and eventually reach a sufficient level that would allow that chain to be justified? And that is extremely theoretical scenario, and the probabilities are 1 in 129 million or something like that, and it requires a ton of sophistication from the attacker, and it can only be performed in a tiny window of time. So we ultimately, I think, Alex, I concur with Alex, the consensus here is it's really not relevant. It's not something that we should worry about. What we plan to do maybe is update the EIP just to elaborate on the trade-off between having chosen the fork digest solution versus the fork version solution, and maybe some brief security implications. But yeah, this is definitely not a cause for concern. At least that's my view.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the extra color. Anyone else have anything to add here? Yeah, Kodos?
I have a question more than something to add, but I just don't really understand why this is even an attack. I mean, if we are in such a situation, it sounds to me like just a normal fork. I understand that we typically across a fork boundary, we would just unpeer from peers that are not following the chain. But if I just forget that the fact that there was a BPO, there was no fork, this would just be just like a normal fork. It's just that people following one of the branches will never accept blocks from the other branch because it has more than the maximum number of blocks. But it's just from the point of view of the ones that actually update it, it's just a normal fork. So it should be just resolved by usual fork choice.
Yeah, the difference,
I don't see any sort of attack here.
I think kind of the unique scenario here is that because we chose the fork digest solution where the network is partitioned, but the state is not partition, so to speak, because there is no change to the beacon state, and as well the domain the signature domain separation tag is also not namespaced. So basically the vector, kind of like the potential potential vector here that could be used would be like cross feeding information between one chain and another. That's basically it. And
I understand, but the thing is that I still don't understand why is this even an attack? This is a difference between the normal branch and this kind of branch. But I don't see why, from the point of view of the chain, this is just not resolved in the exact same way as just a normal branching situation on forgeries.
I think the idea is that the attacker would technically require a bit less stake than they normally would, because you have a couple more people who are on the attacker's fork, because we induced a fork in the chain at the BPO boundary. So like, it's not just the attacker's nodes that are engaging in this, but it's the people that forgot to update that would be engaging, or like.
Sure, and as long as those guys are not a majority of the chain, it's just a normal for-choice branching.
That is correct.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. So, yeah, sounds like we're good to move forward. Again, yeah, thank you everyone who contributed to the conversation. I know there's quite a lot of analysis that went into this. So, okay, what else is on the agenda here? If we're good with that, then yeah, that was really all we had for Fusaka. Anything else we'd like to bring up before we move to Glamsterdam, where I'll just have a few announcements really. Okay. So then, okay, Tony wanted to give an update on a breakout for block level access list. Tony, there you are. Yeah. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, there will be a first breakout call next week on Wednesday, 2 p.m. UTC, usual time, about block level access lists. So if you're interested, feel free to show up or watch the stream.
Okay, cool. Exciting to see that being spun up. And then let's see, there was a last minute addition here. Let me read Ansgar's comment. Meta EIP for the repricing proposals. Yep, Ansgar, would you like to say anything more?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just a quick mention. Obviously, it's more of an EL side topic, so the idea was just to mention briefly now, so that people can have a look, and then next week we can discuss it on ACDE. There was some desire to basically aggregate the individual repricing efforts into some sort of meta EIP, and then next week we could talk about like, does that make sense? What role would the meta EIP have? Would we still want to discuss all the EIPs individually for the governance process, or in some sort of batched form? All these kind of questions. Again, just people have a look. That's all. That EIP is by Maria and me. So reach out to either of us with feedback. Awesome.
Okay, thanks.
Is that for Glamsterdam?
Oh yeah, sorry. That's specifically for Glamsterdam. So those are basically that's just tracking all the potential EIPs that could be relevant for Glamsterdam that are centered around repricings of one sort or another.
Gotcha.
Cool. So take a look there. And yeah, just to call out Terrence's comment, there's also a 7732 breakout next Friday. The link is here in the chat. So yeah, I mean, again, part of our strategy here is to parallelize our fork development process. So yeah, we have a bunch of breakouts spinning up to start making headway on Glamsterdam. And let's see, I think that was it for announcements there. And yeah, the last, actually, let's circle back to this. So there's a question, again, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but AB Kutup, he was asking if there's a way to track, again, this, task of getting everything ready for devnet 5 essentially, where the main thing right now is getting code merged from more experimental branches into default chunks. And yeah, Barnabas, you posted a comment here. Would this be sort of the canonical resource right now?
Yeah, we don't really have any better way because this is like the repo that we use to roll out the images. So like whenever we try to keep up with the images, there's going to be a config drift. So I would just reference this.
Okay, thanks. I'll make sure that it ends up in the notes so people can refer to that. And yeah, okay. So jumping back to Glamsterdam then, yeah, Ansgar's point leads to final thing I had today, which is just a reminder. So we've decided headliners for Glamsterdam, other EIP proposals we want to have made by Fusaka mainnet releases. So, you know, again, we'll see exactly when that is, given how things go with development, but let's say roughly October. So, you know, in a couple months here. And this would be things that are not headliners, but other things we want to put into Glamsterdam. And yeah, I don't think we should get into what those proposals are today, but just as a heads up, please keep that timing in mind so that we can keep moving forward on Glamsterdam once Fusaka is closer to mainnet. So I think that's all we had today, actually. Anything else? Otherwise, we'll wrap up. And okay, yeah, Barnabas?
Yeah, just one more thing. So everybody is on the same page. Ideally, we should have Alpha 6 ready with all the ePBS changes on top of Hulu. And we could probably target late October for ePBS .NET 0.
Okay. Otis?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same. Probably it's a good time to start giving short updates on Glamsterdam on what we're doing. The tests, the spec is going fast. We're adding tests, or Terence is adding a bunch of tests, and Justin is rebasing. There are a couple of things that are still missing in the spec, like the dual deadlines, but that's it. And some changes on proposer head, get proposer head, and some changes for the proposer boost that can be actually backported to phase 0. These are security changes that Francesco proposed. There are other people that are starting to look at the spec, and as always, when you get new people looking at the spec, we are finding edge cases. This is mostly coming from the Lido guys that are looking deeply into how they're going to be proving withdrawals and these kind of things. And there are already some edge cases that could be interesting to look into. For example, I think EIP 4788 currently gives the beacon block root, and it has to give the parent beacon block root because it cannot give you the current beacon block root because it hasn't been constructed. But after ePBS, that EIP, for example, could give the current beacon block root. And it seems that that would be more interesting for people that are actually using that EIP. So it's probably good to start looking into that.
Why is it that much more interesting?
Because then you have something about the current payload. You can actually use something about the current payload, information about the current payload, like the withdrawals that are included in the current payload that were already paid in the CL.
Do you not still have the same circular dependency?
No, the beacon block root does not commit. So how does it go?
I think it does.
Yeah, I think it still does. Yeah, that's right. So the beacon block root can only be the parent. Oh, that's crazy. It cannot be used.
Just, yeah, I mean, until we do something more invasive.
Yeah, so the biggest problem here is that there is no way of proving against the post state of the payload. Because once you have a beacon block root, you only have the state root of the post state of the consensus block and not the payload.
Right. And then I also wonder how that works with execution requests. But
for execution requests, that is fine, right? Because the beacon block root, I mean, everything is committed, and the payload sends the request in the envelope, and they're just only that state root is modified. So there are two state transitions. One is on the beacon block, and then the other one on the payload. And the payload is the one that includes the execution requests. So if you want to prove against what happens after the payload and what happened after those execution requests, you need to have that post state. The envelope commits to that post state, but that post state is not included currently in the beacon state and not in the beacon block, of course.
Okay. In any case, thanks for the update. So yeah, development on 7732 is ongoing. I'll direct people to the next breakout if you want to take a closer look. And yeah, I would suggest just for time today, we move to another topic if there is one. So anything else? Otherwise, we can wrap up and use the time to work on Fusaka releases. Okay, then let's call it. Short call today. Thanks everyone for joining, and I'll see you next time.